So why do we even need an API? Like, okay, to serve the data to the single client, like this is the core Next.js case. Like I'm thinking about it as a backend for frontend, basically. But what about serving the data to the multiple clients, like the web client, mobile, other services, maybe opening up for some external integrations and so on? Well, Next.js wasn't designed for that case. At least this is my assumption. And since the first case is closed, I would like to focus on the latter. And what are our requirements for the web server? Well, it should handle the proper HTTP methods, routing. It should give you opportunity to do some schema validation. It should support OpenAPI specs, has the middleware, be able to run the background jobs and to modify the startup and the teardown of the server. Also, it should be able to provide you some streaming of the files, of the images and so on, and other bunch of things. So there is a bunch of dedicated solutions on the market for the web servers. But what would you say about using Next.js for that? And my name is Michał Michalczuk. I work as a software engineer in the tech consulting, a small consulting agency based in Berlin, Germany. I'm also a talking head in Śniadanie z Programowaniem. Currently on hold, but hey, maybe we'll get back like one day, maybe not. And today I'd like to discuss with you using Next.js as a primary web server solution for serving the data. So first of all, why would you even would like to use Next.js for that? Because you already have the API, because you have the client, and you just want to add the support for the new client, like the mobile. You have it. Why not to just use it and extend it? Because you would like to support for more new customers, like opens for the externals, and so on. Or our case, you're just building the MVP and you just put things which are fast to set up, and Next just does a lot of orchestration and so on. So, you can stick with it for now, as we did. Okay, so fingers crossed we decided to give it a try. And what options do we have on the plate? Okay, so hey, we have Next 14, so let's use all the fresh and funky stuff. Let's use app router plus route handlers. Then you Next.js approach. You can define the handler in the API directory. Routing is based on the convention of the folder structure, supports dynamic routes, business as usual. But does it fulfill our server requirements? Well, we can handle the different HTTP methods. Yeah, sure. You have to declare and export the methods with proper names by the convention, of course. And interesting things is that works on a different representation of request and response than the classic API handlers, because it uses the next response and the next request, which are more high level, more abstract than the previous ones. But more about it later. And nice point about it, that actually this contract is the same for the Node.js environment and for the Edge environment. So unless you're not using any Node.js specific APIs, jokes on me, it will be fine. We'll get back to that. But there's a really small but that there's a limited set of supported HTTP methods. You have get, post, put, patch, delete, head, and options. But until you're using the trace or connect, which is not the common case, I think it will be fine. So it's okay. Right? Right? Okay, it's okay. What about streaming then? Don't play with me. Okay, what about streaming then? So no problem, just use Node.js streams. I just here opened the file as a stream and returned it as a response. Like I actually piped it to the response, like technically works really fine. Okay, what about supporting open API specifications? Sure, not out of the box, but there are a bunch of, but not the bunch, but there are a few libraries like that one, like Next Swagger Doc, where you can just write the YAML in JS docs. Yeah, we love writing the YAML in JS docs, but you can just do it and then dynamically generated and served or statically generated and served just does the job. It won't be easy today. Give me a second. I have the internet. Yes, I have the internet. Okay. Working. Yes, working. Okay, sorry for that. So what about the schema validations? Like, let's use tools like Zod, Yap, Joy, and so on. Yeah, we can totally do it. As in the example, I can just set up the schema and then just manually validate it in the handler body, both body or query params. Yeah, it works. Or you can also use some community libraries for that, like the Next validations. This is the example which actually uses the API routes, not route handlers, but you get the point. Like it exposes some wrappers which you can use in your endpoints. And you can, of course, write your own wrapper. This is one more library, rather niche, something like 30 stars on GitHub, not very popular from what I saw, but it can be used as the good inspiration for you as well. Okay, so let's get back to the more core features. The middleware. So yeah, you can create it, of course, by the convention in the middleware.ts extension, sure, but it doesn't have any nested middlewares, no middleware specific to the folder, and so on. You have to either filter them from the matcher, on the matcher level, or put a bunch of ifs inside the body. Not very convenient. And by default, it runs on the all requests, like literally all, including the request for underscore to underscore next, request for the statics, and so on and so on. But hey, at least you can modify here headers, cookies, which are also headers technically, and you can also send the response as here if you're lacking the authorization or don't have the permissions. Hey, you can handle that on the middleware level. Cool. Or you can just continue in the request response pipeline. And this is the interesting one, because for now, middleware always runs on the edge. By that I mean, it always runs on the V8 isolated instance, not in the node and runtime. So you won't be able to use any node APIs there, like no file system, no node crypto. So I had to switch in my example, I had to switch from JWT token, JWT library which uses node crypto to the one which is based on the web APIs. So pretty annoying actually. So this middleware is not as flexible as I would expect. It does the job, but do I really have to keep it like a single God file, God middleware? It can be a workaround like this, that I can just wrap up my handler. Yeah, but really, this is not what I was expecting, honestly. And speaking about, please mind the order of the middleware and the configuration, how it applies, because before the middleware, way before the middleware, you can also modify the headers directly from the next.config. But please mind that those functions, they are run once at the build time, so it's not run on every request. It's only on the build time. But hey, if you would like to add some X headers, this is probably the best place if they are static. And without going to the other cases, it rather meets our requirements, so we can start working on that. But what else do we have? Do we have any other options? Yeah, we can use the previous, the classic Next.js approach, so the API routes and the pages router, as well API folder, convention, folder structure, you know the drill. But here the handling HTTP methods is rather manual, because you just have to put a bunch of ifs here. And please also mind that you have the different representation of the response and the request. Here you're using the next API response request, which are more raw than in the new approach. Other than that, same story, it just meets our requirements. But this middleware is a bit of a pain in the ass, right? And it's not the express style middleware I would expect. I mean, it would be really great to have it more granular than the one crapping single file. So you can use for that next.config, a small library which will help you if you miss the express style routes and express style middleware. You can use it with both API handlers and route handlers, and it looks just like more express style. Although it might look a bit odd in the app router when you're registering them. Like, yeah, you still have to write it. But hey, you can also put here the express style middleware, which I really appreciate because you can locate it in the very place where you're using it, not in the God middleware file. And you can also use it in the middleware.ts to handle all the branching based on the paths and the HTTP methods directly in the middleware file. So that also looks way better than the bunch of ifs. Okay, so some story from our project. What we did. At some point, we wanted to create a small internal service which had only one consumer, and it was developed by the same 5 developers team. And we wanted to do it quick, like, hey, we're doing the MVP, let's just throw it out, let it do the job. But we wanted to have an easy to replace delivery layer. So we picked Next.js for the job, but hey, how to use Next without spreading it like across the whole service? Well, we did it for Next 11 or so, as I remember. So the only way was to use the API handlers back in the days. And we created a single API handler that just catches all the paths. And to avoid explicit ethology, we created the hidden ethology. So we just used the pattern matching on the request object. We used TS pattern for that. And here we just put our handlers. And before each, we are just like matching on the request. And hey, because of that, we have a single point, a single place to add all of the middleware-ish behaving wrappers, all the startups, tear downs, and so on. So from that point, it's pretty like flexible and convenient. Okay, it can also handle the path params, as you see. It can also handle matching the headers, stuff like that. So it just works for us. And if no matches were found, yeah, just throw 404. And okay, so time passes and this code, it just still works for us. I'm not saying it was the best idea ever, but it was easy to introduce and it will be easy to cut out, and it still does the job for us. But what about those 2 points? I skipped them. Why did I skip them? Well, actually, to have a background job, you probably have to register it or to listen to add the listeners, so it's the same thing. And since it is the last point, because it was my personal pain in the ass, like to have more control over the startup of your Next.js application, you can create a custom server. All you have to do is to write such a file, put here all your custom logic on the initial, and build it by yourself. Yeah, it won't be part of the Next.js bundle, and on the run, it will attach the Next.js handlers to it. Simple, right? 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 Yeah. I was literally doing it this week, and in the configuration of Next.js with custom server plus standalone build, because I wanted to have the standalone build, plus the turbo repo with multiple packages, plus the Docker, I just failed. Like the custom server plus standalone build, it simply doesn't work. Yeah, I have still a few ideas, but it's topic for a different talk. That was annoying. That's really annoying. But hey, there is also a new kit on the blog. It's called instrumentation.ts, and the doc says that it's for the sake of integrating monitoring and logging tools for your application, and it should run on the, I guess, start. Hey, give it a try. Not sure when they introduced it. I used it in the Next 14.1. It ran on the first request, not at the start, which was surprising. And it actually ran twice, but not every time. Sometimes it runs only once, but hey, it's still experimental thing. You can run it under the instrumentation hook flag, so I will wait for it to be more mature in general. And before we move forward, one small thing. In this presentation, I focused on the REST style APIs, but you can also expose the GraphQL API from the Next.js. You can make it the GraphQL server, like with this Apollo server integration for Next. Small teaser, I'm not going to get into it. And getting back to the topic, and crème de la crème, the performance. So let's compare the performance of the Next.js apps in the shapes I just showed you. I hope this poor iconography makes sense. You know, the fruit is fresh, so it's the fresh app router, right? By the way, you can check all of them on my repository, all of the examples. So, also as I mentioned, there is a large set of dedicated web servers. So as a marker of dedicated tool for the job, I've just picked Fastify because I like Fastify. And I benchmark the get API post endpoint. It reads posts from the memory, so no file system overhead while reading the data. There are like 5 posts, which longer-ish content, in general not much of data. And it can handle query params, but I'm not using them during the benchmark. And each app has a corresponding endpoint like this. And also each of them has a middleware that adds the custom xhandler with a timestamp. Plus each route is protected, and it requires a signed JWT, which is verified then in the middleware. And Fastify app, it has all of them as well. Okay, what did I use for the benchmark? I used AutoCannon. This is the HTTP 1.1 benchmarking tool written in Node by Matteo Collina, who's the creator of Fastify, but don't be biased by that. And I ran it with the following parameters. So I was paging the endpoint for the 40 seconds with 100 concurrent connections and with the 10 requests sent at the same time. I think it's a fair stress test. Okay, I ran it on my machine, not this machine. I ran it on my MacBook Air with M1, and all had the same JWT token. Like I literally used this very comment for every benchmark. And let's find out how Next.js scored and were there any difference between Next.js app approaches. So this is the total amount of processed requests for those 40 seconds. That was pretty much a surprise that the old approach, so the Next.js with the pages router, so with the API routes were able to handle about 60% more load than the new approach. I wasn't expecting that. And the difference of the apps using our crazy request pattern matching or the apps using App Connect, it was neglectable, as you see. Okay, so what numbers do I have for the Fastify? Well, a bit different. It was like it proceeded over 15 times more requests than Next.js app router, so the new approach, and like 9 times more than the Next.js pages router. Yeah, speaks for itself, I think. You can also see it from the perspective of proceeding requests per second. Like it was like 28,000 for Fastify, and the highest result from the Next.js app was like 3,000 requests. And if you take a look at it from the latency perspective, like, come on, waiting half second for the small JSON with 5 posts. Come on. To give some context, without such a stress, Next.js API was serving it in like 10 milliseconds or something like that. Fastify in like 2 seconds. But under the heavy load, yeah, there is a really great difference. And last but not least, both Next.js apps in the old way, so with the API routes and the Fastify app, they didn't drop a single request. Like there was no errors. While here in the new app router, I had some timeouts and some errors. It was like 300 for 75,000 requests, but still, they were dropped. And I hope I didn't crush your feelings for Next.js. I still like it. I still use it mainly for how it does the client-server integration and how the ecosystem works. And yeah, even if the Next.js is not the fastest tool on the market as a web server, it can still be a good choice for your API, and especially if you're not as flooded by the traffic as my example during the benchmark. And in the case when you just have the API and want to add the new client, or you would like to open it for the externals, or if you, as us, you're just building the MVP and you would like to spin it up, maybe put it on Vercel, like much of support, low effort, low orchestration, and with all of its limitations, and to some extent, it will do the job for you. And one thing to have in mind, that the old good API routes are just better choice from the perspective of performance than the new route handlers, at least in the next 14.1, which I used. And if you need something more performant, like just use Fastify. And thank you very much.